ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् शृण्वतां स्वकथा कृष्णा पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तन हृदयन्तस्थो ह्यभद्राणि विदुनोति सुहृच्छतम् नष्टप्रायशभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. We'll be just looking at the summary of chapter 28 from Canto 4 today. So I'll summarize based on Srila Prabhupada's purport. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshadarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Basic the blessings of all Asmal Vaishnavas, and thank you for the opportunity to summarize today. So we just finished going through the verses of chapter 28, which is called which is titled Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. So just to recap, I mean, we are again in the section where Narada Muni is instructing King Prachini and just like as parents, we know like kids would not like to be confronted or to be corrected. They always oppose when we ask them to do things directly, but rather if we say the same thing through story, then they might imbibe it better. So here we see that Narada Muni created this allegorical story of Puranjana, and then he's basically at the point where he's saying the whole story about Puranjana is none other than King Prachini, and then he should understand what he should be doing now based on what the King Puranjana went through, and then how he had to suffer in the end. Typically, Srimad Bhagavatam is full of stories, and even Srila Prabhupada summarized a lot of stories from the 10th canto in the book called Krishna Book. And if you think about like generally when we say stories, it's mostly fictional, and only if it's a true story, then we say it's a true story. Meaning, historically, we have seen so many stories in books and textbooks, and whenever there is like a real story, true story, then they specifically call out. But generally, story is a fictional story. But in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's mostly the opposite, where all the stories from Srimad Bhagavatam are true stories, and this one example that we have been going through is kind of a fictional story. Again, Srimad Bhagavatam is Vyasadeva being the most known scholar. He compiled Srimad Bhagavatam, and then he knows exactly how to convey the message. And in this scenario, he's just writing how Narada Muni, basically being also the best preacher, convinced finally King Prachini on self-realization. And we will see in the next chapter that Prachini realizes this, and then he tries to perfect his life given whatever time he has. So just to quickly summarize this chapter, again, in the beginning, we saw how when King Puranjana and his wife were enjoying and everything seemed to be very nice, then at some point, Kala Kanya, the time factor came in, and then he soon approached old age. And after that, because of old age, fear came in, and then also fever, jwara came in, and basically all these took away everything that King Puranjana had. I mean, he had youth, he had fame, he had people, he had money, but everything kind of started separating from him when all this occurred. and he was ignored finally because he was kind of pretty much worthless. Um, and this is where we understand that this chapter basically summarizes a lot of concepts from like self-realization and Bhagavad Gita, because when we see that King Puranjana basically lost all his fame, people, money, etc. And we see that Bhagavad Gita also says that the true miseries, the actual miseries of the living entity are the birth, death, old age, and disease. And these are true miseries because these are common to everyone and cannot be avoided. So there could be other miseries that people think they are miseries, but if they don't satisfy these two categories, that they are true for everyone and they cannot be avoided, then those are not true miseries. But in this case, the birth, death, old age, and disease, it's these are true miseries, and we see that King Puranjana went through that. And we also see in this chapter like lessons about karma, reincarnation, because as soon as King Puranjana left his body, thinking about his wife, then he took birth as the daughter of Vidarbha in a woman form, because that was his thinking during death. Um, but at the same time, we also see nice lessons from this chapter again about how the daughter of King Vidarbha, Vidarbhi, who was Puranjana in his previous life, because he did some austerities, and we also see from Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures that even any amount of devotional service done will still be there in our account, and then it will help us in terms of getting associated with um, some spiritual personality, or coming in contact with some religious organization. So we see here that similarly, because of some piety that King Puranjana did, he took birth, and then also the marriage that occurred between uh, the Queen Vidarbhi and Malaya Dwaja was the best thing that could happen to King Puranjana's or King Vidarbhi, because sorry, Queen Vidarbhi. This is because getting association with a pure devotee like Malaya Dwaja is a blessing, was a blessing for her. And then because of that, she saw Malaya Dwaja as a spiritual master and followed all the austerities like he did, and also got all the benefit. So Prabhupada, in the purport of text 48, because it's a big chapter, I just wanted to read from something from text 48. Prabhupada, in the comment for a purport for text 48, says that the main business of human society is to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at all times, to become his devotees, to worship the Supreme Lord, and to bow down before him. The Acharya, the authorized representative of the Supreme Lord, establishes these principles, but when he disappears, things once again become disordered. The perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. So here we see in this section, Prabhupada, in the context of how the queen was very sad on seeing the departure of her husband Malaya Dwaja, also kind of compares to the situation where a spiritual master might leave this world, then how should his disciples react to it? Because just like here, the queen is so sad, and then she feels desperate, and she thinks there's nothing else or no one else to um, kind of support her and be with her. This is kind of a similar situation that should. Um, this is a similar situation that a devotee is in also when a spiritual master leaves. Um, in fact, I was just reading this one article by Giriraj Maharaj, and he was saying that when Srila Prabhupada also left, um, immediately there was this kind of a turmoil in the organization that, oh, what do we do now? Srila Prabhupada has left. What will keep us going here? And in that section, in that article, basically, Giriraj Maharaj says that a lot of disciples got inspired at that moment or in that situation based on this particular chapter from Srimad Bhagavatam, this Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life chapter from Canto 4. Because this is, Prabhupada exactly addresses this issue here that, not an issue, but addresses the situation here that how do devotees handle when spiritual master leaves? And as we see here, Prabhupada instructs that the perfect disciples of Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. And that's what the disciples did back then when Prabhupada left, that they understood that Prabhupada wanted them to cooperate and then just follow the instructions, although Prabhupada was not physically present, and that makes Prabhupada even more happier. And then that really helped them come out of that situation. So, and again, in this chapter, we also see how towards the end, the super soul came to, in the form of a Brahmana, came to the queen who was morose, and then tried to convince her, and then tried to teach her, give her the science of self-realization, and then about how the super soul and the soul are always together, but then because the individual soul turned away from Krishna or the super soul, then the life starts getting filled with emotions like fear and anger, uh, misery, and how we have to always try to remember our relationship with the super soul. Um, and this is very interesting because if we think about Krishna, in other words, if we want Krishna to think about us, then we need to think about Krishna first. Um, but this is something very interesting because you can have God thinking about us when we think about Him. For example, if we, this is not true materially, because if you think about our friend, for example, if I have a dream about my friend, and then next day I go tell my friend, "Oh, did you know you came in my dream? Did I come in your dream too?" And he would be like, what are you saying?" Like, no. So that's not something that happens materially in this world. That when you think about someone, the other person also thinks about you. Um, but in this case of relationship with Krishna, when we think about Krishna, then immediately Krishna also thinks about us. So that is kind of the reciprocation Krishna provides. Um, so this is something we have to maybe take as a lesson from this chapter, that um, um, when we engage, when we have able health and able mind and able senses, when we put our best efforts to think about Krishna, and just like here in this chapter, as we see later, when the queen was in a very desperate situation, then the super soul came to her and then started instructing. So similarly, when we put an effort um, into devotional service, when we are able to, with 100% of our ability, and then in the end, it's Krishna's responsibility to come and save us. He will come in any form, in form of a spiritual master, in form of devotees, or in form of remembrance. He will come to us, and then he will um, connect with us to make our life successful. So that's one important lesson that comes out from this chapter. And also another lesson is that when we do our daily practice, we can always remember that the super soul is very, very close within us, is in our hearts also. And then when we chant, we should chant with attention, such that the super soul within us is satisfied with our japa or with our services. We always typically think, or I always typically think that, oh, when there is no one around, I mean, who is even watching? So it is okay to be lax in our service, or you might be distracted and you may think that, oh, it is okay. I mean, nobody watched it. But then we should always remember that the super soul is watching, and he is the Anumanta and Upadrashta. He is the witness and he's the approver. I mean, if you're able to do anything, it's because of him. And if we do anything, he's always watching us. So we can always remember that super soul within us, and then we should try to be as attentive as possible during any service, and just not think that no one is watching us. And also when we interact with others, and when we have a different relationship with the different people, we should always see super soul within them and try to please the super soul within them also. So this will help maybe not having negative feelings with each other, and then not having even negative thoughts in our mind about other people. um, Even if you don't express it, we always have some negative thoughts in mind about people, and we should always try to avoid understanding that the super soul within us and the super soul within them will not be happy um, when we have these thoughts. So again, just to kind of wrap up this chapter, it's a very instructive chapter uh, in the form of a story. And then now King Prachini Bharisat will soon realize that, oh, thank you, Narada Muni. This is me. This is what I've been doing. And it's also very instructive for all of us in terms of how we should think about Krishna. And when we think about Krishna, he thinks about us immediately, and how he reciprocates. And if we do devotion service to our best during our youth, and when we are able to, then it is Krishna's responsibility to come and save us in the end, and he will do it. We need to have that faith, because Krishna is a Bhavagrahi Janardana. He will always reciprocate, and he is always looking forward to protecting us, and is our best well wisher. So with that, I'd like to conclude the summary. Thank you for the opportunity.